Is that working? There we go. First of all, a couple of disclaimers here as we get going. This is preliminary information. We're 24 hours plus into this investigation. Our goal here tonight, number one, is to support you as a community. Part of that is explaining to you what happened, where the investigation has gone, and where we currently stand with our investigation. After I am done going through the incident, kind of from beginning to end, Chaplain Boyster will come up and provide you some information on brief counseling and beginning the healing process as a community. After he is done with that, I will come back up and we'll give you an opportunity to ask your questions and hopefully be able to provide you with some answers for those. As we move along, some of you may have been involved in various parts of this incident and how it transpired. And some of what we report may not have been what you saw or remember or so forth, but just understand again, this is the preliminary information that we have at this time. Our detectives, as Chief Jeter alluded to, are still working on this incident as we speak. This will take us several days to process and collect all the various witness statements. This is a very complex investigation, and what makes it complex is, one, the geography in which it covered, the amount of crime scenes we had to process and secure, as well as all of the witness statements and people that were caught in harm's way during this tragic event. So again, the information that you're getting tonight is what we can release for basically 24 hours of investigation that we've been doing since the incident occurred yesterday. I will start by apologizing for the map that you're looking at on the screen, because I know that I can hardly read it standing up here, and I'm guessing you probably can't read any of it, and I have some pretty high-powered contacts and I still can't read it. So we're going to start up here, maybe. There we go. We're going to start up here on 4th Avenue. Approximately 45 minutes prior to the murder of Mr. Johnson, a Puyallup police detective who was an undercover officer who drives an unmarked vehicle without emergency equipment observed the offender driving in an area in the southwest section of the city recklessly. His attention was drawn to the offender because of the manner in which he was driving. Nothing else beyond that. Simply, the detective happened to be in the southwest section of our city, observed this person driving recklessly. The detective, who's driving a non-emergency response vehicle, tried to locate the offender and was unable to. Through the course of the investigation, we learned that the offender abandoned his car in a house in the 1300 block of 4th Avenue. And we know that it's his car because it was registered to him. What we believe transpired from that point is the offender walked southbound on 14th Street, coming down here, where he was found inside Mr. Johnson's pickup truck at his residence. At this point, we believe that the offender was car prone, if you will, or going through the contents of Mr. Johnson's vehicle. Mr. Johnson went out to see what the offender was doing and was immediately killed upon contacting him. The first 911 calls came in. The first unit dispatch was at approximately 2:33. Our first unit in the area was less than 1 minute. So the first marked Puyallup police officer was in your neighborhood in under 60 seconds. As you know, this is fairly close to our police department. And when an incident like this occurs, we all respond to that. And in this incident, it was no different. Anyone who had a gun and a badge responded to this, to include your chief of police and your deputy chief of police. So we had a lot of resources in the area immediately. Once the offender had killed Mr. Johnson, he walked southbound to 6th Avenue, where he made a right turn and began to go eastbound on 6th Avenue. The house at the corner of 6th Avenue, a woman saw what had happened, closed her door, had children at that home. The offender began firing at that family. The offender continued down 6th Avenue, where he comes across this next house on 6th Avenue and begins to fire at that house as well. There is a car parked on the south side of 6th Avenue, about mid-block, that the offender then tries to steal. The offender is not successful in stealing that car. The offender then got out of that car and continued eastbound on 6th Avenue, where he rounded the corner on foot and was now southbound on 13th Street, southwest from that 6th Avenue direction. The people that are in that house, which is was about one over from the corner there, a mom and some teenage children came outside, and the offender immediately began firing on them. Our officers were on foot at this point, basically in pursuit of the offender on 6th Avenue via foot. We also had our first gunfire, we believe, of the offender back at the officers up on 6th Avenue. 2 officers in uniform that were back in that area. As the offender came around and is now southbound on 13th, he encounters his first Puyallup police car, which he immediately shoots in the driver's side door. That round does not strike that officer. That officer begins to alert the other responding officers that this is possibly an active shooter ambush situation, as we would call it. The offender then goes to a house in the 600 block of 13th Street Southwest, where a citizen is pulling in to park her car in the garage. The offender runs up as the garage is attempting to go down, forces the door to go back open, and immediately fires around at that citizen. That citizen basically gave the offender her keys and car and fled in that car. The offender goes southbound on 13th Street, where we now have police officers and police cars in pursuit of the offender, where he gets down here to the end at approximately 12 and 13, and he encounters another citizen in his vehicle, does not fire at that citizen, but threatens that citizen, and that citizen took off running, fled from his vehicle. The offender then leaves down 12th Avenue. Our officers at that point lose sight of the offender and where he went. He's still in the stolen white SUV that he got in the 600 block of 13th Street. Throughout the course of this, the offender is still firing rounds. Through the course of this entire incident, there are 14 different homes that have been hit from beginning to end with gunfire and 8 different crime scenes. The incident covers 1.6 miles from beginning to end. The offender then comes southbound, where he gets up here to 15th Avenue in Fairview, and he encounters our next Puyallup police officer in a marked SUV. That officer tried to pin that subject in, and basically that offender opened fire on our officer a minimum of 4 times. The offender then turns and goes northbound on Fairview Drive. This officer gets turned around and begins in pursuit of that offender northbound on Fairview. The house here on the corner of 15th and Fairview also was hit by gunfire. The offender goes northbound on Fairview, where he comes to a stop line of cars at Fairview and 9th Avenue, and immediately rear ends the back car, which pushes that car into several other cars. The offender then tries to go around, if you will, and becomes disabled in his vehicle, kind of 2 cars back from the stop line. The offender exited his car. He went up to a Dodge Caravan. That was the first car in line with an elderly couple. Attempted to take their car from them, was unsuccessful in doing that, and then began firing rounds into that vehicle. Wow. At this point, there is a Puyallup police detective who is on the west side of 9th Avenue Southwest, who fires 2 rounds from approximately 80 yards and strikes the subject in the back left rear hip area. That causes the offender to go down. The officer that had been in pursuit of him in the SUV that had taken gunfire here had continued on around the corner, immediately came up on the curb, and basically ran into the offender with his car, pinning him down on the ground, keeping him down. The offender was not compliant at the time of arrest. Officers had to take him into custody, and then 4 officers, 2 of which were officers that he fired upon, provided life-saving medical aid to him. The offender was then transported to the hospital, where he remains recovering from his injuries. A very dynamic situation for us. The timeline for this incident, from the initial 911 call to basically our officers, let me give up on this because it's not working, to the officers asking for medical aid for the offender was under 8 minutes. I can't tell you the number of rounds that were fired, but earlier in the day, we were providing some information. We would estimate that there's probably a good 30 rounds that were fired from the offender during this incident. And there were 2 rounds fired from a Puyallup police detective from approximately 80 yards, which is an incredible shot to take. The, again, multi-agency crime response unit will continue to investigate this. Lots of folks were caught in the incident here. Our hope tonight is to be able to provide you again with the resources and information that can help you to begin the healing process. And as a department, we firmly believe that that is also having a good, clear picture of what happened. The question of why did this happen? Why was he here? What was he doing in our neighborhood? We don't know the answer to that. It appears initially from our preliminary investigation that this was a random act of violence. We have not determined at this point any tie from this offender to your neighborhood or anyone in your neighborhood. The investigation will continue on that as we are able to interview more people, but at this point we have not determined a tie again on why he was specifically in this area. We do know that 45 minutes prior to Mr. Johnson's murder, he was driving very recklessly in the southwest area. And it appears he abandoned his car for whatever reason, got out on foot, and ended up in the neighborhood. The offender, again, will face multiple charges. He does have significant criminal history, and that will be an issue for the courts and the prosecutors to take up. As the chief alluded to, several acts of bravery and absolute courage and valor by our officers in this case. We're very grateful for the public who called in and provided us very key information as this is happening. We only have, as police officers, so many eyes and ears out there, so we are grateful for people who called in, provided that information. If you were someone who witnessed this incident or a part of this incident and have not yet spoken with a Puyallup police officer or a Puyallup police detective, we would ask that you call our tip line or contact the police department so we can have an investigator speak with you. With that, I will turn it over to Chaplain Boyster, who will move into the grief counseling department.
I just want to take a couple minutes